Today. Well, let's start off with our first guest. This is Brent Gruber, Executive Director of Electric Vehicle Practice at nearby J.D. Power. You guys are in, is it Troy? Is that where you guys
That's
are
right.
at?
Yep,
I'm
exactly.
thinking you're up there, yes. Anyway, what he's going to be talking about is a new study, but I actually picked it up from Tech Century that Matt runs and put it on my website last week, and it caught my eye. So let's talk a little bit about your new study. You can share your slides if you want as you talk, and I just showed you how to do that, so you should be good to go. New models and influx of first-time EV owners are changing the landscape. Tell me all about it.
That's right. So this study is the one that focuses on the total ownership experience. So we have a number of different electric vehicle studies at J.D. Power, but this one is sort of a catch-all that talks a little bit or deals with a little bit of everything. So right from the point of purchase through the ownership experience, charging, right up into and through the service experience. This is the third year of the study. So as you can imagine, a lot has changed in those 3 years. We went from very few models in the study, and this year's study, including a lot more models than we had in previous years. So reflecting that change in the market for sure.
All right. So who are the winners in this survey of electric vehicles so far this year?
Yeah, so the first 2 years were consistent. And this year we had a bit of a change. So in 2021 and 2022, Tesla received the award in the premium battery electric vehicle segment. And then Kia with the Niro EV received the award in the mass market segment. So we had completely new award recipients in both categories this year. In the premium segment, it was the Rivian R1T. So we finally get a chance to see a truck in the rankings this year. And then on the mass market side, it was the Mini Cooper Electric.
Huh. Okay. So tax credits and incentives, what's going on with those right now?
Yeah, so a lot of incentives out there for consumers. And one of the reasons why we have so many models represented in the study this year is because so many more people were buying them. And a lot of that was driven by the tax credits and incentives. So there's a lot of opportunity for folks to get into electric vehicles through the tax incentives that were created by the Inflation Reduction Act. That's driven a lot of people into these EVs, including a lot of first-time consumers. So a big influx of first-time consumers that are, very interested in these new models that are coming to the market.
Yeah, the percentage of first-time EV buyers, you said, rose from 74% to 85% this year. I think I remember reading that EVs have gone from 5% of the local or of the overall vehicle market to 7 or 8%. Is that about right?
That's right. Yeah. Through February, we were at 8.4%. So 8.4% of U.S. retail sales are battery electric vehicles. And that's nearly double what it was at that time last year. So we're starting to see that rate of acceleration increase quite dramatically. But yeah, you're right. That was driven very much by first-time EV owners.
So what is it that makes for a good electric vehicle ownership experience? What are the important things that the automakers need to be paying attention to?
Well, if you look at those models in the rank charts there, each of those performs where they do for various reasons. So there's some things that stand out for a given model, some things that it has some areas that are deficient. So for example, the non-Tesla models have lower satisfaction with public charging. So Tesla has the benefit of their public charging network, and that helps those models rate well. But the areas that those non-Tesla models do well outside of public charging really boost their performance. So when you look at something like the Rivian R1T, very high levels of satisfaction with the quality, the styling. That's what I call the emotional appeal. So those aspects of the vehicles that create emotional appeal, that fun to drive, nice to look at type of experience. That's what really drives the performance for a lot of these vehicles.
Well, speaking of which, looking at your notes here, that 75% of those people that did purchase an EV cited performance. Now, I've only driven a couple of EVs, but they're pretty spunky off the line, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, they sure are. Yeah, the premium buyer is definitely looking for that performance-oriented aspect. So when we look at those purchase drivers for these different types of vehicles on that premium side there on the left, that's driving a lot of that interest in those products. You know, like you said, Mike, those are very, very performance-oriented, instant torque and acceleration. That really resonates with consumers, particularly the premium consumer.
Including our president, who has a lead foot. I've seen him at several exhibitions where he jumps in an EV and just pounds it right down to the floor and boom, takes off like a rocket. I'm sure that makes the Secret Service very nervous, but
yeah, and you know, and it's not just the premium side. That driving performance aspect is really important to the mass market consumer as well. You know, you look at a model like the Mini Cooper Electric, it has the lowest battery range in the study at about 114 miles. So, you know, its range is quite low compared to the other models, but it excels in a lot of those, like I said, emotionally appealing areas, that driving performance, the styling, it's fun to drive. And so, you know, whether it's the premium side or the mass market side, that those aspects resonate with consumers.
Yeah, that was my next question, is where are we headed with range? The dreaded range anxiety.
yeah, that was my question as well. So good question.
Yeah, you know, there's still a lot of anxiety around range, a lot of anxiety around the range in relation to public charging, you know, which we see as the biggest deterrent to EV consideration, the availability of public charging stations. So, you know, those two things go hand in hand. We're seeing an increase in the expectations for the miles in terms of range on these vehicles. We're looking at about 263 miles on the mass market side and 313 miles in range on the premium side. And what that is an indication of where that range level needs to be for an EV owner to not modify their driving behavior. So we ask respondents what influence having an EV and the limitations of the range, what that does to their driving behavior. And so you find that threshold where it doesn't affect their driving behavior, and it's 263 and 313, but those are going up. And that's reflective of that changing consumer. You know, we're moving away from those early adopters towards those more mainstream consumers, you know, the typical auto consumer. And with that comes a different set of expectations, in this case, more range.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder whether in Michigan, and I think of my own case, I have in-laws and friends and whatnot in the area lovingly referred to in Michigan as up north. And they are all between 250 and 300 miles away from me, where I am here in the Detroit area. And when I think of the summer exodus of Michigan to go to those up north places, that's just about the distance we're talking about, is somewhere between 250 and 300 miles. I can't help thinking in Michigan that that's the number people are really concerned about.
That's right. Yeah. And I live in Michigan too, Matt. So I see exactly what you're seeing. And you know, unfortunately in our state, there's certainly a lack of infrastructure needed for public charging. And you know, people are going to be forced to travel some pretty considerable distances without easy access to public charging. And that's going to create a lot of anxiety, which it already has created a lot of anxiety, but will continue to do so.
Yeah, these vehicles take forever to charge on 110. 220 is no picnic either. What they really need is the fast chargers that's 400 plus, right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, fast chargers are going to shorten that time considerably. Unfortunately, it's a byproduct of the vehicle and the charger itself. So we need both of those two things to work well together. We need vehicles that can maximize those fast charge rates, and then those fast chargers to be available.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was really more of a climate and energy bill, was a whole bunch of money for public charging stations, right? Are those going up? Are people talking about that at this point? Is that still just all talk, or are they actually going up?
They're actually starting. So the way that act worked was it was part of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So those two acts both contributed money to building out the public charging infrastructure. The states submitted their plans to the federal government to show how they would utilize that investment, and they submitted those plans not long ago, and they're on their way. They're starting to enact those changes.
The other big question here in Michigan is how good are these vehicles in the snow? I mean, obviously, I would think the all-wheel drive ones would be, but what about the ones that are front-wheel drive?
That's right. Yeah, we definitely have a mix of vehicle types here. Certainly some are all-wheel drive, which those of us in Michigan would appreciate. But some of those, we talk about the performance aspect, may not be ideal for those of us here with these Michigan winters. Not a lot of options on the all-wheel drive side just as of yet. Some front wheel drives, but a lot of performance oriented rear wheel drive vehicles for sure.
Okay.
So there's still, despite all the good things and all the stuff we're overcoming, there's sure a lot of, I guess the price is what scares a lot of people off. Wonderful to have these things, and gosh, I'd like to, but $70,000 for a car is not exactly what I have in mind. Now, of course, that's the high end. But I mean, even the middle range, you're looking at least what, 50-ish, somewhere on that ballpark?
Yeah. The prices are on the surface high, certainly much higher than what consumers may be used to seeing with internal combustion powered vehicles. The one thing that I would caution though is there's a lot more than just the sticker price that you see with an electric vehicle. There are incentives available to help lower that cost, but when you factor in the fuel cost that you'll be saving, not going to the gas pump and being able to charge at home if you have access where it's cost effective and convenient. That cost of ownership with reduced maintenance and reduced fuel costs really kind of swings in the favor of EVs in a lot of cases. And so looking at that sticker price, can be a little bit misleading. Take all of those things into account. And we're starting to see some pretty favorable options on the price side, especially here from local manufacturers like GM with the Chevy Bolt and the Bolt EUV. Those types of products are rather affordable compared to non-electric vehicles.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Bolt is going away though, right? And it's going to be replaced by, I guess, an electric version of the Equinox that's coming out later this year or early next.
Yeah, General Motors is getting ready for a number of model introductions. You've got the Chevy Blazer, the Chevy Equinox that you mentioned, and then the Silverado not far out as well. So, this is going to be a big year for General Motors with the introduction of their electric vehicles.